Yeah, well, I showed before how I was an avid reader. And so they gave me a badge and a gun, and I got to chase crooks, and I was working plain clothes, narcotics, and I was on a meth lab surveillance in Lucerne Valley, which there's nothing out there. And a lot of people think that surveillances are like what they show on TV, and they're not like that. You have one guy with the eye, and everybody else is laid off somewhere in a parking lot. And like some guys had TVs, and some guys played basketball, and somebody yells, "Okay, we're rolling," and we jump in the cars, and we follow somebody. So I kept novels in the back seat of my car, and I would read books. So they're paying me to play cops and robbers, and I get to read novels, right? So I'm down to my last book in the back seat of my car, and it's they call it a sophomore effort of this guy who was an international bestseller. I read that book. I thought it was great, so I thought, this is going to be a good book. But what happens is an author will work on a book for 10 years and keep rewriting it, but he's not improving his craft. You have to have your craft down tight. So this next book came out, and it was a dog. But I was a captive audience, so I read the whole book all the way through, and I thought, I could do better than this. So I wrote my first 4 novels on the front seat of my car. Each one was 4 legal pads long. And I quickly realized that a good author makes it look easy, because it is not anywhere near easy as you think it might be.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm joined this week by David Putnam. David spent over 30 years in law enforcement. He worked multiple agencies in Southern California and even did a short stint at the AG's office in Hawaii. He retired in 2011, and today he's a published author. Funny thing is, though, his writing career actually began in 1989. He was assigned to a narcotics team, and during those long surveillances, he started writing. 36 books later, he got his first break. Today, he's published over 60 books, including the Bruno Johnson series, which is where I came to know about David, and he continues to write more. This was a fun conversation. You'll hear some stories that he's woven into his books, as well as tips and advice for those who want to be writers. So let's get into it. Here's episode 119 with David Putnam. Talk to me about where young David grew up.
I grew up in Ontario, California. I was born in Upland. We lived on the border of Montclair and Ontario on Benson and High Street.
Still largely fruit orchards and stuff back then?
There was fruit orchards surrounding the house when we moved in, yeah. That was a new track. I think my mom paid $11,000 for the house in 1957. There was 6 of us. We lived in a 3-bedroom house. My older sister had a room. My 2 other sisters had a room, and the 3 boys slept wherever they fell. We had sleeping bags, and I slept mostly under the dining room table. So my mom got up to get my stepfather ready for work and that kind of thing. But before that, my roots are kind of artistic, because my father, who left when I was 5, I believe, I never had a memory of him when I was young. He had an artistic vent that he needed to feed all the time. He was a deputy sheriff at West End Station, San Benito County Sheriff's. And on a sideline, when he wasn't working, he put these hand-carved tikis on the side of the garage, and he built a 6-foot native with a spear out of concrete and chicken wire. It looked pretty real. And then the big thing was right in front of the house, he built this volcano, and he put shrubs all around it, and he painted it fluorescent, and the front side face. So you had the tikis on the front, the native, and then you had this volcano, and it was painted fluorescent, and he put the shrubs that looked like jungle around it. And then on the front, between the house, on the other side of it was a barbecue. So when he barbecued, smoke came out of the volcano. So cars were coming down Benson, and they would look and see it, and they would cause car accidents. So he got cited for having a public nuisance in the front yard. Then he left, and we were I call us dirt poor. My mom she was selling toys, party plan to support us. And she would say, okay, kids, get in a station wagon. We're going night farming. And we would go to different places in South Ontario, and we'd pick corn at night or watermelons and that kind of thing to supplement our food. And I remember very young, she would take me to stand in line for the welfare, and we would go to a converted theater, and we'd stand in line, and our turn to come up, and they would give us boxes. Mom took me to carry boxes of that mystery meat in a can, or the big blocks of Velveeta cheese, and bags of rice, and she did a really great job feeding us because there was always food. She always kept a big bowl of rice pudding in the refrigerator. We could eat on any time. She would cauldron cook. She would have this big pot, and she would put fish stew one night, beans and ham hocks, and she was always food for us kids. Did a great job for that kind of thing. She was very creative, and she always messed with us, played jokes on us, and it kind of continued on throughout our life as I got older. She continued selling things on the party plan, and I would turn all the pictures upside down in the house, and she'd be talking to somebody, and they'd be talking to her, and they would start going like this to the picture, and she'd turn around and look, and she would just like, oh. One time I took all the stuff out of the china cabinet, turned it upside down and put it back in, and we were sitting at the table, and she comes in and she goes, "What? I know you kid did something. What'd you do?" And she's leaning up against it, that kind of stuff. But she would do wild stuff like for Easter when kids were real little, she would take some the white shoe polish with a sponge tip, and she would make bunny tracks, and she went all the way around the block one Easter night, the whole block with the bunny tracks, so the kids, when they woke up, they would follow the tracks all the way around the block, that kind of stuff. But my mom, to give a little background, she was one of three sisters that lived in a travel trailer in Thermal, California. And it was very hot, no air conditioning. And my grandmother, her nickname was Jinx, and she was a loose woman. The sisters had a different father for each sister. One was a redhead, one was blonde, and my mom was brunette. And as soon as, I think my mom left home at 15, and she was managing a diner, on Salton Sea. But my Aunt Carol, so it was my Aunt Virginia, my mom in age, and then my Aunt Carol. And my Aunt Carol stayed local. She stayed in Indio. So as I grew up, my Aunt Virginia went and she became a little bit affluent. I lived in Redondo Beach. My Aunt Carol lived in Indio. And my mom had 6 kids. She couldn't take the kids, juggling the kids, the party plan and all that stuff. So every summer I get farmed out. I go to a month in Redondo Beach with my aunt and then one time she put me on a Greyhound bus when I think I was 9, as I recall, because I had a grocery bag for a suitcase, and she gave me some oatmeal, the instant oatmeal. I had a box of instant oatmeal sitting on top, and she told me that she told the driver he's getting off in Indio, keep an eye on him. And I'm sitting in the front seat right behind the driver, and we're driving along. I'm holding my bag, and this seagull hits the front windshield of the bus, and it splattered all over. And the driver just casually turns on the windshield wipers and just a mess and feathers everywhere. I get off the bus. My Aunt Carol picks me up, and she smoked, and she was really a harsh voice, and she called us little shit asses, get in the car kind of thing. So
term of endearment.
Yeah. So she takes us, she goes, "I'm going to take you to the theater." And it was the Aztec Theater, because I remember all this very vividly. And she stops at the liquor store and buys a candy because it's cheaper, and I had chicken O sticks. And we go in, this is going to be a good movie. She goes, "I'll pick you up in 2 hours. Stand out here when you're done." And she bought the tickets for us. We go in, I sit down, the lights come down, and it's in cold blood. Black and white. And I'm 9 years old. And I sit and watch this like I'm stunned. So that's kind of the background from my aunt. Later on, when I became a sheriff's explorer for West End, and that was really I had a lot of fun doing that. But I became a police cadet after that at 17, I think. And it's like an intern where you do gopher jobs. You wear a uniform with cadet on the patch, same uniform, cadet on the patch, and you just did whatever they want you to do, that kind of thing. Well, my uncle, who's married to my Aunt Carol, my favorite uncle, And he reminded me of Richard Egan, the old actor, really a nice guy. I mean, I really got along with him well when I went to stay out there, the month in the summer. Found out that my aunt and my cousin Danny, we called him Little Danny because my Aunt Virginia had a Danny too. I don't know why both women wanted to name their kids Danny. Found out that my aunt and my cousin were selling tar heroin for the Mexican mafia. So my uncle said, you stop selling this stuff or I'm going to call the cops on you and drag your ass to jail. So they thought that they were wronged. My uncle worked at the Metropolitan Water District. You could check all this stuff on Google. Metropolitan Water District in Indio. He was a supervisor. So my Aunt Carol and my cousin Danny hired a hitman named Cornelius out of Orange County. And they called in a stick to call in, said there was an emergency at the plant one night. My uncle showed up to unlock the gate, and they stepped out and they assassinated my uncle, my cousin Danny, and this guy Cornelius.
Wow. One way to deal with a family issue.
Yeah. And I just found out this because we just got back from Europe, and I got to get to know my sisters because all the sisters went. And I didn't know that my aunt had doubled my uncle's life insurance policy just before this happened. Indio didn't have anything on him because it was how difficult it is to investigate a hitman kind of murder.
And what time period are we talking?
Well, I was a cadet, so I was about 17. So that would put it 78, I think. Okay. Right around there. I pulled up but my memory's starting to fade. They couldn't get anything on him, so the cops went at it a different way. They talked to my cousin's girlfriend. They wired her and sent her in for conversation. So they ended up arresting my aunt and my cousin, Danny, for murder. And while they were in jail, my mom was going to see him. And David, you got to go see your aunt. I go, I'm not going to go see either one of those people in jail while they're going through the process. So my aunt asked my mom to watch Ronald and Julie, the two other Danny's sisters and brothers. And so my mom brought them to our house and we were keeping them there. Well,
so now you're 8 in the house, 8 kids in the house?
Yeah, but I think I'd moved out by that time. I moved out when I was 17. Yeah. I punched out my stepfather because he was such a bad man, and walked out and I never went back. But, my mom kept going, and I never find out what happened. She wouldn't tell me, but she got sideways with my Aunt Carol into jail. And so they stiffed in and called my mom's house. And my aunt had the Mexican mafia kick my mom's door in and kidnap the 2 kids from my mom's house in Ontario when I was working as a police cadet at Ontario Police Department. So my aunt, through attorneys, told my cousin, hey, you take the heat, admit the whole thing that you did it. I'll get the best attorneys and I'll get you out. And so he did, and my aunt got out, and she just walked away, left him there.
And that was her son?
That was her son. He got LWOP and life without, and our governor just let him out after 38 years. He's on the street again. So that's kind of the background before I even started in law enforcement.
You bring a lot to the table. Going back real quick. So of the 6 brothers and sisters, where did you fall in? Oldest, youngest, kind of middle?
It was girl, boy, all the way down. So my sister's the oldest. I'm next. And then there was, so it was Lori, me, Sherry, Donald, Robin, Jimmy. Robin and Jimmy are half brother and sister from my stepfather. We used to do, we were still, even though my stepfather came into the scene, he was a janitor at the water district in, I think it was Claremont. And he got a job for the plumbers. He was a pipe fitter, but it was off and on kind of thing. So we were still hand to mouth kind of thing. So if I wanted anything, like my mom said, you're going to wear the same school clothes next year unless you earn the money in the summer so I could choose to wear high water pants or, church too, or I would go out and work. And if she saw us laying around or watching television too much, she would say, get in the car. And she would drive around the neighborhood and she would see somebody's house that's all tore up and she'd go knock on the door. Hello? My son here will tear all that ivy out, take out the whole yard for ivy for $20, and she would keep us working all the time. So I paid for my own car, I paid for my own insurance, my yearbook, my school clothes, and she actually made us kind of independent. So it wasn't a big thing when I moved out. I was ready.
As far as being a young kid, what kind of took up your free time when you had it? I mean, were you good in school?
No, I was terrible in school. I didn't know until later, until I put a name to it, but I got pretty bad dyslexia. And the only thing that saved me in high school was I loved to read. I read everything. I started in fifth grade. My fifth grade teacher, which was kind of ironic because she started me reading. She read us Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, The Bronze Bow, all these great books in fifth grade. Later on, when I became a cop, I got a call to her house, and I had to commit her 5150 because she had dementia. That kind of thing. Another one, my first year as a cop, and I put that in one of my books. Small town cop, you always run into things that are different than other. When I went to work at LA, I never had that kind of problem. I got a call one night of a naked man dancing in the front yard of his house. I pull up and...
Sounds normal.
Yeah, uniform. And this is a very fluent part of Ontario, up in the northwest corner, north of the college, high school. And it's my psych teacher from high school. So I said, come over here. I won't say his name. Come on over here. Called him by name. He comes walking over, and I open a car door, and he sits down naked. And he's sitting there, he's looking up at me and goes, this isn't good, is it? I don't know. It's not good.
What was your first clue?
I was going somewhere, and I got up on a tile.
We were just talking about you as a kid and kind of not a good student.
So I would read all these books. I mean, I read everything. So when an opportunity came up in high school to take a speed reading class, I jumped on it because I'm the faster I could read more books. So it wasn't anything like I thought it was going to be. It's just sitting in a dark room, and then the instructor had this Texas instrument, and he would flash these numbers on the wall, and he would start with 4 numbers, and you'd sit there in the dark, and you just write these numbers down, and pretty soon they're flashing 16 numbers, and you're writing all 16 down, because it's all a matter. Your mind has the capability of doing it, but we're taught from the very beginning, see, spot, run. We're taught that way to read, but it's just a matter of retraining your mind. So then they would put a sentence up, and you'd write it down, and pretty soon they're putting a paragraph, and then pretty soon they're flashing the whole page up on the screen. And I forgot the speed I was reading. It was fast. Like I could read a book by about the speed I could turn a page, and I was about 90%. So I had no discipline for school. I didn't like most of the topics, and so the bell would ring to go to class, and I would read the lesson in between classes. Math, I could not comprehend. I still can't comprehend math, and I was labeled a class disruption. And then in pre-algebra in high school, the teacher actually made a deal with me. If you don't show up the rest of the semester, I'll give you a C. Because one time she put me in the front of the class to watch me, and this was a regular thing. The Latin teacher did the same thing. And so I had a jacket on, and I took this big orange out, and I started peeling this orange, and the whole class stops because everybody's looking at me, and she comes over and stands right in front of my desk, and I peel this orange, keep peeling the orange, looking at her, and I finally peel it, and I pull a slice off, and I go to put it in my mouth. She goes, if you eat that orange, I'm going to suspend you. I go, whoa, I don't want to get suspended for eating an orange. So I put it down, I reached in my pocket, and I pulled an apple out, and I took a bite of the apple, and just busted the whole class off, that kind of thing. The Latin teacher put me on a stool sitting up next to him, because I was busting the class up too much, and still he couldn't control it, so I got kicked out of Latin. I got kicked out of German. Mr. Kessler couldn't figure out how I was cheating. Every Friday we'd have a test, and it was an open book test, but I didn't know one word of German, but I would ace the test every time because he would give us the test ahead of time, and I would unsharpen my pencil real sharp and take the German book, and I push it down all the way open. I write the answers in the binding of the book. so he'd come up, the test would start, and he'd come over and he'd go, Putnam, stand up, and he'd frisk me looking for criminals because he could not understand how I was doing it. So he would stand there looking at me on a desk, and I would just put my arm on the book, and it pushed it open, and I would just write the answer down. He come walking over, look at my, he could not figure out. He kicked me out anyway. So I made it through Spanish. Otherwise, I would have had a problem. That kind of thing went on in high school. I had a good time. In fact, I went to my counselor. I said, I'm having such a good time. I want to stay another year. He goes, you are not staying another year in high school. And so, yeah, it was fun. I had a great time growing up.
Did you play any sports, do anything like that?
Part of the reason I think I am who I am today is because I got recruited for basketball for DeMolay. It's the youth group of the Masonic Lodge. So I played from 15 to 19, I think it was. We won jurisdictional California for 4 years, I think. Yeah, a lot of fun, but it was a lot of work too.
Now, you mentioned your love of reading started when you were in 5th grade. Mm-hmm. What drew you into reading? Was it kind of a sense of escape, or?
I don't know. I think everybody, I would, when I read a book, I just fall into the book, and everything just falls away. So it is a sense of escape, but I didn't need to escape. I just liked being in that book. And so when I try to write my books, I try to do the same thing. And I actually teach a class on how to write a novel, and I break it down because I have dyslexia, the workarounds that I actually develop for myself. So I have 17 precepts that I do to write a book. So I'm on book number 66 right now, and I could write 2.5 a year because of these precepts.
The dyslexia, you said you were obviously not diagnosed with it as a young boy because it wasn't a term. Going back though and being that young kid, what was it that you could identify where was your kind of like your stumbling block? It's kind of weird in your mind, or still happens today. I'll write a sentence backwards, and it's really freaky the way it looks. But even today, I even though I'm aware of it, because I go back and reread everything I wrote the day before, and there's backward sentences, and that really screws you up in school when you can't put the words in the right place in the right time. And I didn't know about this until I had my kids, and they had not only had dyslexia, they also had dysgraphia, which is just as bad, and they had both of them. I had to put them in a special school to try to overcome, have them understand what they have and how to work around it. Is there anything that you've adopted since learning that they had dyslexia I know you talked about the 17 steps that you have for writing a book. Did that come out of learning that your kids had dyslexia?
No, it just came out because I wrote so many books trying to get published. I wrote 38 books before I sold my first book. I was on my 4th agent, and I didn't sell a book, the first book, and that was in 2014. So I started writing in 1989, and I didn't sell a book till 2014. And as it turned out, my wife, very vivacious, outgoing, she took Toastmasters, and she met this woman in Toastmasters, and she heard about my books, read my books, and manuscripts. And she was skin diving in Bora Bora with the owner of the publishing company and said, "Hey, you need to read this guy's books." And that's how it started. I was going to go someplace else with that. Oh, I lost my train of thought.
I want to, before we get into your writing and your books, I want to talk about your law enforcement career. So you mentioned your biological father was a cop, but you didn't have a relationship as a kid with him, or did you still have contact with him even though he had moved out when you were 5? Well,
we had the usual hostage, I call them hostage trades, where
it's your weekend.
Yeah, exactly. But it wasn't every weekend. It was like maybe once a quarter, and we'd go spend a night with him, and that was it. So he was an oil painter. He worked for Lockheed. He had 36 different classifications on Lockheed where he could work on the plane. And that was hit and miss too, the kind of work. So he did a lot of upholstery out of his garage. He had to have the artistic bent all the time. And he would oil paint. He if you go to Vence's, Vence's restaurant, I think even Rancho and the one in Ontario, he painted the pictures. You go in there and you see the elevation picture of Vince's. I think they have one of the first one where they have the stools out front, and then you have the other one, just a regular elevation. they opened Vince's down in Temecula, right here in Temecula, the one that because you're from here. It's right off of
Jefferson.
Jefferson, yeah, right. And it was this fast food place, and they made it a Vince's Express. So my wife goes in there one day, and she's going to do a drive-through, and they're not coming to the window, so she gets out, goes in, and they're preparing this big, huge order, takeout order. So they give her a glass of wine to, cool her jets, and she goes, "Hey, my husband, he says his father and his my stepmother Thelma, but she was a wackadoo too. She worked there at Vince's for 25 years, and the guy goes, "Oh, well, come here," and he walks around the corner in Vince's. You can still go there now in Temecula, and there's a picture my dad painted, and it says D. Putnam, and it ended up in Vince, in Temecula, a picture of Temecula, 2 miles from my house.
They had to put something on the wall.
Yeah. So I painted a little bit with him. He would teach me how to paint, and I liked Frank Franzetta, and I painted a lot of those pictures. I don't know if you know Franzetta. He did the Edgar Rice Burroughs pictures for the covers. The Man of Mars. Those wild pictures on the front of covers.
That sounds familiar.
Big muscular people, women are semi-clad, spear fighting, the big animals, that kind of thing. So I like those kind, and he helped me. And I almost wanted to follow that, but I still took a hard left and hard right and took off into law enforcement. And I think that started more in earnest when I went to ROP, Regional Occupational Program, and so it was one class every week. I'd go drive to Laverne, and a sergeant from Laverne put the class on, and that really kind of sealed it for me, and that's what got me into the cadet program in Ontario.
What took you into those ROP classes?
I was a chef's explorer.
Oh,
that was my next step, and I thought, if they're going to give me school credit for this, I'll go sit in class and listen to war stories. Yeah, so it was a good experience for me too. But I bought my own car, and I had a Javelin from my aunt. I paid her $200 for it because she wouldn't give it to me. And my dad painted it because, he was into that kind of thing, reupholstered it. And, he kind of fixed it up like what happened in the 1950s. He put fur in the back window, put a light blue racing stripe on it, right? So I was a kid, and I thought, I want some big wheels on it. So I bought these big wheels for the back, and they wouldn't fit the bolt pattern. So the guy goes, "Oh, put this spacer on. It'll make it work." So all right. So I put the spacer on, lock them down. And we're driving on Berlin and Hawthorne in Ontario, and I go over a bump. I'm driving along, and all of a sudden I see this tire driving off in front of me, right? So some poor slob, and my car falls. I'm
the poor slob.
So I remember this very vividly. People back then, there was still friendly people. They pulled over to help me, and this guy comes up and goes, "Here, you lost your nuts." And he hands me my nuts in both hands, which was was
he kind of following behind you and watching them fall off one at a time?
Nobody was nice enough to walk back and pick up my nuts for me, which was kind of what do you call a simile of what actually happened. Yeah. And we did some, I was not a kid that, I should have been in jail a couple of times. My stepfather he was a welder too, and because he, pipe fitting welder. So we had 2 tanks in the garage, and my brother was a real shit ass. He figured this stuff out. He got these toy balloons, and he filled it with this, I think it was acetylene, tied a string on it, soaked a string in gasoline, and and then sent the balloon up, and woof. And so I'm walking, and I see that, and I go, "Oh, that is bitching." So I try it. The first time I try it, my mom pulls into the driveway just as I let the balloon go, and the wind catches it, and it blows up right in front of her windshield. And she jumps out, screaming, "Don't you ever do that again." So we thought we could probably get away with it one more time. We went to the store, and we bought a bunch of toy balloons. I mean, we pulled our panties. Back then, you could still turn in bottles. We'd go for the bottles and turn the bottles in. So we went and bought a bunch of toy balloons, and we were in that garage for a couple of hours filling balloons up. We'd make this big, long, get this spool of string, and we made it real long and thick, and we soaked it in this jar, and we said we can't launch it here because mom, right? So we go just around the block, the other side of the block, over to Paul's house, and we light it and we send it up. And it's just this huge conglomerate of acetylene balloons. And it's going over the neighborhood. We watch it get smaller and smaller. I go, it's not going to go. It's not going to. All of a sudden, whoa, boom. I mean, it shook the windows. And I was laughing. And I come running around the block, and Mom was standing in the front yard because she knew exactly what happened. And, I should have looked it up because somebody back then, when I became a cop, I should have pulled records to see if anybody reported, because it had to happen right over somebody's house. We did a lot of that kind of stuff.
So you started as a cadet. You were an explorer with San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department first, correct?
Right.
And then you became a cadet at Ontario PD.
Right.
What year did you become a cop at Ontario PD?
I was 20 years old, and I went to the academy in 79, 59th class of San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department. And I was too young, and the DIs just got all over me. They were trying to cull me in the worst way. And I got angry about it. So I was running. I knew that my academic issue was going to take my full focus to get through the academy. So I concentrated beforehand on my physical. So I was doing push-ups, and I would run 10 miles every other day, straight 10 miles. I was in top shape. So the first time I get to the academy, we just told to show up. I was 20 years old. And stand at attention in the parking lot. And there was 112 of us the first day. And they let us stand out there, because stuff let us fester a little bit. And before they come out, and they like locusts and start yelling and screaming. So they told us okay, now get in the quad, run to the quad, double time to the quad, and stand at attention in the quad. So we're all running. There's 112 of us, and we're bumping, banging, and I slip and go down and get up and get in formation. And they come walking through the choke point between the two buildings. And they said, whose gun strap is this? And I feel down as my gun strap. I raise my hand. They come over and they get in my face. And I was too young, immature. Thinking back on it, I didn't think so then. They gave me 500 push-ups to work off 50 push-ups each time we go into class. So everybody go into class, and I would do 50 push-ups before I could go in, and I had 500. The fifth day was Friday, so I started on Monday. Friday, the first day, 12 deputy recruits just said, walked away, so I'm not doing this. So we were already down to 100 or so. The fifth day, I was tired because what happened? You're running, and the pressure, the stress. My alarm didn't go off, so I had purchased, because I was a police cadet. I was making more money, regular paycheck. I bought this 77 Pontiac Firebird, root beer brown, and it had a little dent in it, but it had a small engine. It wasn't had the V8, small engine. So I get in this car, and I am driving over the speed limit, running red lights when I could, trying to get there because I know my ass is going to be had for being late. So the academy is on Cajon Boulevard and Institution Road. And if you continue on, you go over the railroad tracks and get on the 215 freeway. So I'm coming up Cajon, and I take that turn, and it's dark because we were supposed to be there at 5:30 or 6 o'clock in the morning, and it's dark, and I'm not even paying attention. I take the corner too fast, and there's gravel because it turns to dirt, and this car I'm making a left, he's making a right, veers off and goes off into the desert to try to avoid, because I'm slewed around sideways. And so I go driving up the Institution Road.
Let me guess, one of the DI staff. Because who else is out there at that time of the morning?
So we're standing on the grinder, and they let us stand there an hour, and they come out and they're yelling and screaming. And finally, this one DI, he shaved his head, and he had a face that's real narrow with real cut lines, and dark eye, under his dark eyes, he looked like a cadaver. So his nickname was the Skull. All the cadets would call him the Skull. So he gets in front of the class, and he goes, "Who ran me off the road this morning?" Yeah, it's me. So then everybody goes into class, and they're all over me. Get your shit. You're no longer stand. So I get all my stuff out of my locker. I go stand. This is the fifth day. And I'm standing, and I can see into the DI office, and they're sitting on their desk talking and joking and stuff. And the skull comes out and goes, "What are you still doing here?" And I said, "I'm not leaving." And he goes, "You're done. Get out." And he goes back in. I'm still standing there. And I'm holding my Class A that's still in the plastic. I've got all my books, and I'm holding everything like this, standing, and I'm starting to quake. And I think I don't know how long I stood there. It seemed like it was hours. It might have been an hour. The skull comes out and says, "What are you doing here? Aren't you supposed to be in class?" That kind of shit. So they gave me 1,000 push-ups to work off. Nobody else is doing push-ups, but because they want me out of the deal. And then I got mad. I wanted to quit in the worst way, and this is probably what really changed my life. It did change my life because of discipline. Later on, the skull was a lieutenant, my first commander on SWAT. I got some good stories there too.
Did he remember you?
Oh yeah, because I ambushed him one night on you have those practicals. When you start having practicals, if you make it through, we called out 50 or so recruits. We were down to a class of 50, and we would have those practicals. And so, we're not supposed to talk to everybody because it's supposed to be, but we would whisper and say, "Okay, this is an ambush." So me and this Marine, I kind of got with this Marine, and we had our guns. We had blanks in them. And we had blanks for the shotgun, and we knew that it was going to be an ambush, so we snuck up on them, and they didn't hear us coming. And we ambushed them, and they just about crapped their pants. It was so, and they said, I didn't endure myself to them. And then this Palm Springs guy, I was the number one pistol shooter because I used to buy 1,000 rounds and go up to Ladder Creek and shoot. I could shoot. I shot Distinguished Expert my whole career, but this Palm Springs guy, I could not believe how he was shooting. I'd come over and pat him down. "Where's your 38 caliber pin?" Because I know he's punching holes in it. He goes up there. So I would work it to where I would be standing close, either next to him or one over. And when we were shooting, I would pull over and I would fire one on. I'd throw a round on for him.
Just to piss him off?
No, so he would have a lower score than me.
Right.
Yeah. So Fragolti was the FBI guy that was teaching, and he'd catch on to it, and he'd put me at the other end and yell at me and stuff. A Marine got caught for breaking into the DI's office and stealing because he was really dumber than a rock, and he stole the answers. And so they expelled him. Another guy, he was 50 years old. He caught a rattlesnake, killed it, and put it in because they were staying they were bunking at the academy. It was smelling the whole place up. So even though I was high profile, these guys were starting to pull the heat off me.
You're like, "Thank you."
Yeah. So then they put us in a bus, and they drive us to these hills, and it was like a triple hill, like a camelback, and they weren't real tall, but we would wind sprint them. We'd get on the bus, and we'd wind sprint up and run down and go up the next one. We'd do 3. And we did a couple of them, and they're trying to push unity. Get us to work as a team kind of thing. So I was in top shape. I was probably the best shape, I think, of anybody. There was one guy from Brawley, I think. But I could run. I had wind. So these 2 DIs that I could not stand because they were just always on me, giving me more push-ups. I'd work my 1,000 down, and they'd give me another 1,000, give me another 500. So
graduation day, you're still doing push-ups. You're still low.
I get to the top of the hill, and I would yell, "One more time!" Let's do it one more time, right? And the DI scowled at me the first time, and the second time I did it, he comes up to me, grabs me, "Son of a bitch, don't you say no," because they can't say no because of the right. So I had him. So then,
and they had to run it too.
They were running, exactly. That's when he's mad, because I was running him into the ground. I was running him into a nub. So. We all got together as a class because that's what they wanted, and we went to breakfast, and we came an hour late. We did it on purpose, and they were pissed. And they took our plaque, the 59th class plaque, and our flag, and they took it up to Academy Peak, and they still run Academy Peak. I don't know how they do it with, at least I heard they did. And they said, after your first class, we're going to run Academy Peak. And so the instructor didn't show up, and they put a movie on for us, like we're some kind of elementary kids, right? So me and this Marine, we low crawled out of the room. We ran over, we ran up, got the flag, got the guide on, and we come down. We sneak back into class within an hour. It was a long run. And the class was just cheering, yeah, because we don't have to run Academy Pig, right? So the movie's over. We come out of class, and the guy who's supposed to carry the guide on comes walking out, and one guy puts the plaque above the door like it's supposed to be, and the DIs come out, and they are pissed, furious, right? And Skull comes running right over to me, gets right up in my face. Putnam, you had something to do with this, didn't you? I go, sir, no, sir. And he goes, look down. I looked down, and I forgot to dust my shoes on.
All dirty.
They're all dirty. So he had me again. So I gave him another 1,000 push-ups. Yeah.
Hey, at least you made the academy fun.
That wasn't fun. It wasn't fun until you look back on it.
Oh, yeah.
It was a pain in the ass, but yeah. And they'd march us every day to chow, and it was the jail food. We'd sit at the stainless steel tables and eat the crummy jail food. It was miserable. Yeah, when I was a cadet, though, before I even went to the academy, they wanted me to work 40 hours a week as long as I continued to go to school, junior college. But nobody paid attention to it. So I would ride. I would work my 40 hours, and then I would go out on swing shift. I get off at 5, and I jump into swing shift 2 hours in, and I rode 5-6 nights a week for 2 years. I mean, I was putting in. I had no time for anything. My friends kind of faded away because I loved going out on those ride-alongs. One cop even gave me a .38 to put in my back pocket, which was, he said that was back in wilder times when the Black Angels and the Cucamonga Kings and everybody, and he goes, "You gonna ride with me? You gonna back me up if something happens?" And I thought that was really slick. But yeah, I got into some stuff that I should not have seen at that age. I think some really horrific stuff. One Christmas Day, I was riding instead of at home with my folks and my brothers and sisters, and there was a house fire, and we saw the smoke, and we called it out. And I was with this officer, T.C. Jones, a really good guy, and we pull up, and there's 2 naked people on the overhang of the second story, the husband and the wife, and he yelling, our babies are in the house. And T.C. runs up and he kicks the door in, not thinking, and the backdraft just blew him right off the porch. And the fire department gets there, and they get the people down, and they put the fire out, and they bring these kids out, and the parents, they wanted to sleep at night, so they strapped their kids into the beds. They couldn't get out if they wanted to, and they were so they bring them out and they put them by this tree, and they cover them with this quilt. I think there was 3 of them, and the grandparents show up. What happened? What's going on? And they're all distraught, and they're moving around me. I'm trying to direct them. I'm a cadet and trying to keep them away from the blanket, but they actually move over and they start stepping on the blanket. You got to stand over here, kind of thing. So, I was 17, 18 years old when that was going on. Another one, we went to one of those hostage exchange where the wife didn't show up, and the husband said, no, I know she's in there. We won't knock on the door. So we end up kicking the front door in, and the water washed out of the house because she had clogged all the drains in the house, every drain in the house, and turned all the water on. So there was about 4 inches of water in the house. And as we go in, slopping in, there's little rivulets of blood on top of the water. And she had shot the 3 kids and then laid on the couch and put the gun to her chest. It was a .22, and shot herself. And she was the only one alive because a bullet hit the vest, bro, and deviated. That kind of stuff when I was just brand new.
And you weren't even a cop at this point.
I was a cadet, yeah.
Did any of that ever make you kind of second guess wanting to be a cop?
No, because there were better things. There were funner things.
Of course.
That overpowered it. And then, yeah.
So you started your career at Ontario also as an officer, but you eventually left. What made you want to get out of there?
I wanted more action. I was put on a cover shift, which is a special team in Ontario, and I got into before I was even put into that. My first year, I got into an officer-involved shooting, and it was a pretty wild kidnap, robbery kind of thing. I was by myself, and I had to shoot the guy. Yeah, after 3 years, I wanted more action. They eventually, because I would just sniff stuff out. I would get into stuff that other guys weren't getting into. And so I went to LA County Sheriff's.
What made you pick there?
Because I went to LAPD, and I walked in and I said, I'm a cop, 4 years. I'd like to lateral over. And they go, we can't even give you an application. Why? Because it skews our numbers. And I said, I want to see your supervisor. So this D2 in plain clothes comes out and says, we can't give a white guy, basically. He said, an application because we have a certain quota we have to meet, and you're going to screw our numbers. So I said, fine. So I call
mid-'80s.
That was early 80s.
Early 80s.
That would be about 83.
Okay.
Yeah. So I said, I'm going to go to. I'll apply to LA County Sheriff's, and I applied, and it was like bam. They took me, and the chief of police from Ontario, because the sergeants were saying, he's going to be the next chief of police because of the stuff I was doing. And then so the chief calls me in for an exit interview, and he goes, why are you leaving? And I don't want to tell him I wanted more action. I just said, because LA gave me a $500 a month raise, which was huge back then. So I went to the jail.
They still made you go through the jail even though you'd already been a cop?
Yeah. And I had no clue. And my first day at the LA County Jail was an eye-opener, because back then there was 22,000 people in custody, and they were...
Were you at CJ?
Yeah, downtown, Boucher Street. And because of my experience, they put me in high power right off. I had to work the blocks a couple of nights just to get a feel for what it is. It was old side and new side. And these guys would, they had these passes. And so you get a pass for medical, for religion, all kinds of different things, psych, visiting. And so people, and I put this in a book one time, and this lady comes up and goes, people aren't walking free in a jail. I said, there's a Sally Port, and everybody's walking around. And so people from the old side are coming over and robbing, raping, and murdering on the new side. So it's like a city. Your investigation is just like a city. And the crooks can... The first time I worked chow on 2000, there's 3 deputies. There's a deputy that's assigned to stand at the hard door, and there's 2 deputies in there with hundreds of inmates eating. And you rotate them in, rotate them out. And I said, how come that deputy standing over there? I says, well, if it turns into a riot, he slams the door and locks you in with him, right? So, and I didn't really, I thought that would be bad. But one night it happened. I went to Red Bells, and Red Bells means lock the jail down and everybody's rolling. They have a big crash cart, with the face mask and the shields and the big long batons. And so the alarm's going off, and I was chosen because you come in and there's a sheet. There's like 3 sheets, 110 deputies working on a ship. And you get designated, you get a star by your name. So I was on that shift that night in the Red Bells. So I go running in there, and we open the door because we're all ready to go in, and there's 2 deputies standing on a stainless steel tables with those big silver
serving spoons?
No, pitchers.
Oh,
silver pitchers, and they're just, it's like the lions are trying to. So I went to high power. And my first night in the jail, I talked around. I said, hey, I came here because I want the action. Where's the hottest place in the county? And everybody said, without even hesitating, Linwood. So as soon as I saw what I was getting into, I went to the watch deputy's office, and I took my transfer in for Linwood. That's all I put in. I just put Linwood. And so that night, the sergeant comes to me and says, hey, I know you're new here. You made a mistake. You don't know what you're doing. You don't want to go to Linwood. And I said, is that the hottest place in the county? He goes, it's the hottest place in the county, but nobody is on the list. They are ordering people to go. And I said, well, I'm going.
Better than being here.
Yeah. So instead of doing 3 to 5 years, I did 5 months, and then I was out to Linwood. And even though I had been in an officer-involved shooting, I was jumped by 5 guys once in Ontario, jumped by 6 guys once in Ontario. I get to Linwood, and they put me in the TO for 6 months, mandatory. And this guy treated me like a regular boot. The first week, something happened, and he took his sap out, in Big 415 Gonzales, and sapped me in the chest. I took mine out, and I sapped him back, and he's like, "What?" Kind of shocked because he wasn't used to a trainee that was going to. So, yeah, we had he eventually, because we got into a bunch of stuff. I mean, some wild shootings and stuff in 6 months. I don't know if you want me to go into those stories, but I put a lot of them in my books. So,
what I'd like to hit on though is I've heard you talk about how it only took about 4 years at Linwood, and you kind of
I burned out. Yeah. Well, at Linwood, there's 4 Linwood cars, maybe 3 Linwood cars and a traffic car, and then there's 2 East Compton cars, 2 men East Compton cars, but they never had 2. They only had 1. 2 Willowbrook cars, and they never had 2. They only had 1 2-man car because of budgets. The city gets manpower first as a contract, so they pull from the county stations. They weren't supposed to the union gets mad when they would put a jail deputy come look, because they let jail deputies ride without overtime. Back then, they don't do it anymore. But the union would yell, jump up and down if they would field a 2-man Willowbrook car with 1 jail deputy. Yeah, I don't know where I was going with that.
When you said you got burned out, can you talk about what you were experiencing or what was?
Well, what happened was I got hurt pretty bad, and it was bad for me anyway. But before that, I don't know if you want to. I don't know if I should go into the stories.
Please.
I went there to be a crime car, 2-man crime car. I wanted the action because it's cowboys and Indians every night. You can't go there and say, I'm just going to cruise. So they looked at my record, and I was trying to be a diligent deputy officer down in Ontario. So I had basic, advanced, and skid mark training at Ontario. I went to Maryloma Space Center and we crashed cars. I mean, that's the extent of my training. Even though my math was bad, they showed me the formulas, and I could just barely work those out. I knew what to put on their form, so somebody else, which measurements to put. So they said, you're going to work a traffic car in Linwood. And I said, I don't want to. That's not me. So, and it didn't matter. So I got off training and put me in a traffic car. And I thought, the only way to get what I want is to do a good job. So I would write a book of tickets a night. And so I would sit in the briefing, and I would put the date, the time, the court. I'd fill the whole ticket out. I even put some streets down, because I knew the stop signs that they're really habitual. So I would write 25 tickets, and the traffic sergeant, I was bumping his stats up and
spending every day off in court.
Nobody fought.
Oh,
I didn't go one time for a ticket, and then what? It's a different world.
Yeah, different time too.
Yeah. So when I've got nothing to do, my mind starts working. So I went to I was bored, so I went to the detective sergeants. There's 2 of them: crimes against property, crimes against persons. And I said, "Hey, you got any warrants you want served? Because I'm between tickets. I'll go anytime I can feed my handcuffs. I'm happy." So he looks at me funny, because back then it was against the image, the machismo of the deputy, to take a warrant arrest. It has to be what they call a PC arrest or an RC arrest, reasonable cause arrest. And then when you get to jail, then you find a warrant arrest, right? It was really I didn't care. So I said, yeah. I looked, and they had all kinds of warrants. I mean, I was a stack of warrants. So I picked the heaviest ones, and I go knock on the door. Hey, is Mr. Jones here? No, Mr. Jones is here. And I was still 4 years on. I was still kind of new. Figured they were lying to me. So I had these business cards printed up in a uniform in a black and white traffic car. I go knock on the door. Mr. Jones here? No, Mr. Jones is there. And I said, well, Deputy Putnam, I'm on special assignment with the county assessor's office. Last time Mr. Jones was arrested, a small percentage of his bail was not refunded to him. If he doesn't pick it up in the next 10 working days, it reverts back to the county general fund. Right? Well, pretty good scam. So I knocked on some doors and saw some cards away. And about the 4th or 5th one, the first night I was doing this, and Mr. Jones here? No. I go, that's too bad. I give him the spiel. He goes, oh, okay. I'm Mr. Jones. I said, give me some ID. I don't have any ID. So now I think maybe he's just trying to steal my money, right? So I go out, I write on the back of the card, I wrote 1015, 1029 franc on the back of the card. Right. So I said, you could try to come down to the station and we'll give you your money. He goes, what if I get my mama? My mama will tell you. I go, okay, get your mom. My mom goes, yeah, that's Mr. Jones. I go, the money's in the car. Come out in the car. Hook him up, and I take him to the station. You got to run an arrest by the watch sergeant. So I go in, I tell him this, I show him the booking form, and I start telling my story. I show him the business cards, and he starts laughing his ass off. Another sergeant walks by, hey, come on. Tell him what happened. And I tell him the story, and they're both laughing. And I'm getting into it. So I said, yeah, you think that's funny? They're going to start turning themselves in pretty soon. And they said, oh, these crooks are stupid, but they're not that stupid.
I was going to say, didn't the sheriff's department do something in the late 80s or early 90s where they sent out things for like free shoes or something and told people to come on into the...
I don't know about that.
I thought it was something similar to that, but it was all people who had warrants.
Well, maybe they took it off because I was doing this in 83, 84. And so it was perfect timing. Like a sitcom, the watch deputy sticks his head in and goes, hey, Dave, there's some guy out front that says you owe him some money. So pretty soon I wasn't writing any tickets because I was arresting everybody. And I knew the word would go out in the ghetto pretty quick. But the detective sergeants, I was clearing all their cases by arrest, and they were loving me, and I was working traffic. So one day the traffic sergeant comes to me, and this is only like 2 weeks in. He says, if you make one more arrest and it's not in the vehicle, you will be a traffic officer the rest of your career. I said, ooh, I'm not doing that. So I was pissed. Detective sergeant, I got one guy, they had actually surveilled. He had a $50,000 warrant for 245. They surveilled him, they couldn't get him. He walked in the door to get his money. So I come to get this guy. I go, I can't do that anymore. What do you mean you can't do that anymore? And I said, my traffic sergeant said, and they said, what? And they beelined it, both of them beelined it for the traffic sergeant, and they started yelling, the door slammed. I go, hey, I'm going to be in a crime car tomorrow. Do my job, come back. Next day, I'm on the desk because I caused so much shit that they put me on the desk. And now I was upset. So the desk guy is supposed to handle people come in the front office and mark off the reports that the deputies turn in. Make sure that the case number and mark it off. And so pretty soon on board, I start reading the reports and I start calling up. Hey, is Mr. Jones there? They were coming in, and I was arresting them at the front counter. So I get called in the watch commander's office and shut the door, and they said, my desk officer can't be arresting more people than my field personnel. So he says, you stop what you're doing, lay low for a while, and I'll take care of you. So I did, and as soon as I did my penance, they put me on a team. They said, here, two of the guys, you guys go do whatever you want. They just turn us loose. And then I really started getting in some trouble out there. So I ran hot, what you're saying. And then I made training officer right away. They put me in street narcotics. I was in 3 shootings or 4 shootings in street narcotics right off. A couple of them are just crazy shootouts. And then I went to a burglary in progress call in East Compton. And I pull up and park, and I'm walking up to the house, park 2 houses down. I'm walking up, that's a front window smash, big picture window. And as I'm walking up, the crook comes to the window, and he runs to the back of the house. And this happened to me in Ontario exactly when I shot that guy with a kidnapped kid. The same exact setup. I run, I go to vault the fence, and it's a cinder block fence with a top cap. And I didn't realize it because I was moving too fast, and I was in top shape. I was going for the SWAT team. I mean, I was running. I was bench pressing. I was doing 5 sets of 5 of 350. I was huge. And I went to vault that wall, and I didn't realize that the guy could afford the block, but he couldn't afford the mortar. So I went through it like the Hulk, came out the other side, and my arm popped out and it was hanging down to my knee. And I was seeing red and blue and white flashes. I was going into shock. But the crook comes right out the back door. So I took my gun. I said, lay on the ground. I'm going to kill you. And he lays on the ground, and I put my gun between my knees, and I toss him in handcuffs. Hey, handcuff yourself. I marched him out to the front with my arm, and I'm telling you, I have never been in so much pain. So my backup deputy gets there, grabs the crook, and the sergeant comes pulling up, and he goes, get in the car. And he puts me in the passenger seat of his car, and he's calling the hospital and tell him to get ready. And he's driving too fast, and he's hitting the intersections. Boom, bam. And my arm popped back in because the doctor said because I was so muscular at the time that the muscles just kind of sucked it back up. And they get their x-ray me, and I had blood, the subcutaneous blood, all the way down to my waist. things.
Oh, wow.
Because it tore everything. So,
so it wasn't a simple dislocation. You tore ligaments and everything else.
Yeah, it was bad. It was bad. I ended up working watch deputy because I was considered a bonus deputy because I was already training officer, and I didn't like working the desk. And the first night though that had happened, I went to the county doctor or whatever, and those guys are bad news. They gave me Vicodin, and Vicodin doesn't touch me for some reason. So I took the Vicodin, I drank a fifth of beer, nothing. I mean, I was still in so much pain, and I had me wrapped up like this. So I went back to the ER, and I said, look, I'm going to go into shock. This is so much pain. I'm not kidding you. It would hurt. So the guy goes, well, here, try this. And he gave me some Percocet, right? So I went home.
Percocet work?
Yeah. I took a Percocet and drank another 50 beer, right? And I'm sitting there waiting. And like in 20 minutes, I felt this tingling on top of my head. And that's all I felt. And all of a sudden, whoosh, like a warm blanket just went. And I was like, oh, I could play basketball now. So what happened was my back, how the ribs come around to the spine, and they call them rib heads. The rib head was out, and nobody caught it, and a big knot of scar tissue held it out. So every time I would move a certain way, it would pop out, and I'd get spasm up and down my back. So I said, and I was burnt out. I had all these violent confrontations. I was jumped by 5 guys. I jumped by 6 guys. My worst fight was one guy in Watts, and he come up the street, no top, no shirt on, big buffed, institutionalized buff, swinging his arms, I'm going to kill you, that kind of thing. I broke all the bones above his eyes. I broke his nose.
Was he dusted?
Oh yeah, tore my epaulets off, tore my badge off. Both my knees were skinned and my pants were hanging down. I tore one boot. I mean, it was a fight. My back pocket was torn. My notebook was gone. Anyway, and that was where I was on training. And when we got calls back LAPD up in Nickerson Gardens and the projects, and I pulled up one night and there's 300-400 people surrounding the city bus, and the lights going across. It says, "Help! Call the police!" And they are just eating this brand new bus. And LAPD's at the end of the street, and we just wave because there's nothing we could do. That kind of thing. It was like that every night. You get a burglary in progress call and you pull up and they are just taking everything out of the store. You can't. So, you do 4 years of that, and I was ready to go. So I applied to.
Was there one final incident or event?
That was the injury.
Okay.
It just kind of drug on and it kept hurting. So I applied to Newport Beach and Santa Ana and a couple others. So I put in for Walnut and Industry, but I wasn't getting transferred because you get a stigma from where I was working. So I go in a suit and tie to sit down at the oral at Newport Beach. And as soon as I sit down, they say, "Thank you, Mr. Putnam, for coming in, but we don't think you can make the transition from ghetto deputy to beach deputy." And that was the end of my interview. They 86'd me right then. So I couldn't go anywhere. I was stuck. And maybe I never treated anybody bad. I mean, I never hit anybody that was handcuffed. I never, just whatever had to be done, I did it. I wasn't that kind. I didn't work that way. I liked the job. I liked talking to people. So I called Samuel County Sheriff because that's where my roots were, is where I went to the academy. And I called and talked to the guy, and I said, "Wait, look, I don't want to go through all this, and you find out that, that you can't take me because I worked at Linwood Station." And he goes, no. He goes, "Come and apply." 2 weeks from the day I called, I was working the jail.
Oh, back in the jail again.
Back in the jail again. But it's kind of a low mod kind of thing. I was working Glen Helen, but I was the most experienced. I had 4 years at Ontario, 4 years at LA, and I was a top dog deputy-wise, so they put me in WEDUs, which was weekend duty officer. So my job was all the paperwork of all these hundreds of people that came in on Friday night to do their weekends. So the first night they come in, they have to stay overnight, 2 nights in the jail, and then we assign them to a Caltrans crew or whatever. So I was an expert in narcotics by then. So I was a weekend duty officer, and they'd line up at this gatehouse every Friday night, hundreds of them, and I would start arresting people because they're coming in under the influence, right?
Kind of defeated the purpose of getting work release people.
Right. We can't have them in the jail under narcotics. So, and I'm a happy guy. I'm treating everybody, hey, come on over here under arrest, sit down right here. So the watch sergeant comes out and I got like 8 people sitting on the curb handcuffed. Because what are you doing? We can't have them in our jail on the influence. And one night this big dude comes in and he's dusted and I can see he's dusted. And I said, we're going to have a problem. And I call for other deputies to come and help, but he goes out before that. And I go over the counter and grab him. This is back when I had to choke him because I wasn't going to get my.
I've already destroyed one shoulder.
So I got him in a karate restraint, and the sergeants come out. And he goes, "Oh, what is going on?" So I lasted about 5 months, and they pushed me out. They said, "You go to the desert. You go work in the desert." So I get the desert. 27 deputies covering 3,000 square miles, and we would put out 4 cars. You had Summit Valley, Lucerne Valley. I mean, there's just hundreds of miles.
Well, and for people who aren't from Southern California, don't know already how big San Bernardino County is to begin with.
It's 20,000 square miles, the largest county in the continental United States. So I'm used to cowboys and Indians every night, and the first week, they put me with a training officer just for orientation, just to show me around kind of thing. We go to this bank building in the evening, and the sheriff shows up, which is, I've never seen a sheriff in LA County. And he goes, "Hey, help's on the way." I look at the guy and I go, what is he talking about? He says there's over half the people were seeing the site for stress because we had so many calls for service because the population exploded and the county had not assigned more deputies up there. So we would get a burglary call Monday, and we wouldn't get to it until Friday. That's how backed up they were. So deputies are pulling up and people are screaming and yelling at them, whatever. Which it's just a paper call. I tell them, you guys are going to shrink about paper calls. So I'm working nights and I don't want to slight to the deputies, but there was no proactive patrol going on. So I would go out, and as I'm driving to my first call, because that's all you do is chase calls, I would pull a car over. I'd get a pound of meth because there's nobody's guns, and I would load my car up. I'd have the crooks in the car. I get on a PA, "Please step outside for your burglary report." I take the burglary report and I'd say, "Give me a report number for burglary, gun." I said, I run to the jail, book them, run back. I mean, I am just having the time of my life because it was just wide open. Anybody used to pull over. You had to look for the crooks, but they were all over there, wall-to-wall crooks. So I did less than a year, and they said, "Oh, you need to go to Crook Criminal, the SWAT team." So they bumped me right over to the SWAT team. I did a year there, and I promoted to corporal, and I went back to working as a training officer at Apple Valley. Did a year there, and went back to the SWAT team. I did 9 years total.
And at the end of that time, you actually went to Hawaii. How'd that come about?
No, I did 2 tours on the SWAT team, and I worked violent crimes. I chased bank robbers, and
no, I meant at the end of your time at San Bernardino Sheriff's.
So what happened was I knew I was going to retire, so I applied for sergeant, which was my mistake because I had a lot of autonomy as a detective. I worked as a detective at the airport. I worked in narcotic interdiction. That was a lot of fun too. So I applied for sergeant. I got promoted to sergeant, and I went back to the jail again. Right?
Every deputy's bane of his existence.
So I get to jail. I said, I do not. As a sergeant, I didn't like it. So there was an opening.
It's almost a punishment for promoting.
It is.
Because even as a lieutenant, you go back to being the lieutenant at the jail.
Right. So I said, I want out. And they said, well, there's an opening at Joshua Tree. And I said, why is anybody taking that? So I took it 96 miles one way from my house.
Middle of nowhere.
And it was the biggest freak show I've ever seen because all the French people, I could tell you some great Yucca Valley stories. One Halloween story you would not believe. So anyway, I did 27 months up there in Apple, and as a sergeant. I didn't like being a sergeant. They transferred me down to Fontana. I did 6 years at Fontana, and the captain who was there went to become undersheriff, and he kept haranguing me about working in internal affairs. You want to promote a lieutenant? He goes, "You come work for me for lieutenant internal affairs 1 year, and I'll make you a lieutenant." I didn't want to be a lieutenant because I didn't want to be a sergeant. But so I think he called 3 times, and my captain started getting mad because I'm not taking a job. So finally I took the job. And I was there for 1 year, and I didn't like it at all. Some stuff happened. One of the things was that the assignments are, I would have like 5 stations that I was responsible for. Another sergeant had 5 stations. One deputy had all the jails. They broke it up that way. I think there was 19 stations. So the lieutenant comes in one day and he hands me this big, huge, and I go, come on, man, because I got 28 cases now that I'm juggling now, and those aren't like regular investigations. Those are very detailed, technical, because you're juggling. They call it the Chinese wall. You got HR, and there's just so much going on. So I always open it up, and it's corrections, and there's I think 25 deputies involved in it or something. And I go, oh, you made a mistake. This is so and so. So I don't want to say the name. And the lieutenant goes, yeah, but you and I both know we can't write this. So I said, thanks. So right then I pull up the computer as soon as he leaves, and I start applying for jobs in Hawaii because I'm turning 50. And Hawaii gives me a call back and said, yeah, come and take an interview, an oral interview. And I thought this was going to be a piece of cake. And I get there, I fly there. My wife is from Hawaii. That's why I did it.
Okay.
She grew up in Hawaii.
I was going to ask you, what was the draw?
Yeah. Otherwise I wouldn't have gone. So we've been going back and forth to see her folks, so I know Hawaii pretty well as it is. So I show up in a suit and tie, and that's not what you're supposed to do in Hawaii because there's no suit and ties unless you go in a federal court. But everybody else has this is one of my shirts I wear for work. So I'm in a suit and tie, 2-hour oral interview. They asked me everything, man. I am not kidding you.
Was this for a local PD, like Oahu PD, or?
It's the Hawaii 5-0. It was special agent for the state of Hawaii.
Oh, okay.
Under the Attorney General's office. So I thought I did pretty well, and they called me and offered me a job. So I turned my resignation in, and the undersheriff told the lieutenant, said, hey, if he wants to come back, tell him that we got a job for him. And the lieutenant goes, he's retiring from our department. So, and I get to Hawaii, and they give me like 3 cases or 4 cases to do, and I'm used to juggling 28. I am bored out of my mind. They're filming the fake Hawaii 5-0 outside my office, and I come driving in, and there's a fake Hawaii 5-0 car stopped in my slot. And one time I was on a phone call, and they're having a fake shootout outside my. I got to tell them, no, it's okay.
It's not real.
It's not real. But we had a condo. I mean, we were half a block from the water, and we were within walking distance to 200 restaurants. I mean, it was a fun time. But they do things a lot different there. My first case was an assault case, and I worked it up, and I said I got a warrant for the guy. And I go to my boss. I said, hey, I'm going to go kick this guy's door in and take him to jail. He goes, whoa, we don't do that here. I go, what do you mean you don't do that here? He looks over, he goes, yeah, the calendar, he goes, call him, have him come in on Thursday. We're going to have the bus here on Thursday. They didn't go, they just called the crooks up, and they come in, and and then right then I thought, ooh, this is probably not a good idea for me. So, and people, there's no lawsuits there like they are here. The people that live there and grown up there, they still have the righteous aloha spirit. You get in a car crash, and the person that's at fault will bring a Tupperware tray of brownies over and say, "Oh, I'm real sorry. I know it wasn't your fault. Thank you." And that's it. That's the end of it. So,
how long did you do there?
I did 3 years, and you trade off doing duty officer of the day, DO, and you get the calls coming in, and that was only exciting because I try to snag some calls from Maui and stuff. No, that's Maui PD. You can't have that kind of stuff. And one day I'm sitting there, first my wife says, you shouldn't tell this story, this part. I'll do my cases, and the boss, my supervisor, comes and goes, "Hey, you keep doing these like this so quickly. Everybody's gonna keep handing you more. Other teams are handing me their cases, and they don't." And I said, "I don't care. I'm bored." So some of my peers come to me, and they're all locals, and they talk pidgin, and sometimes I can't understand them. I'm the actual only white guy, so. Anyway, they said, "Hey, we like that you're doing these cases, but when you do them, just hold them for a couple of weeks before you turn them in because you're making us look bad." So I said, yeah, thanks. I'll work on it, kind of thing. So I started typing the first book. I was on my 38th book, and I typed the Bruno book that was there. It was a 36, and I typed it at my desk in between doing the stuff they gave me. So this guy, one guy, stands up in the cubicles and says, "Hey, does anybody know what a 1031 exchange is?" And I go, "Yeah, I know." And so he goes, "You want to take this call?" So I took the call, and it was this huge Ponzi fraud. And I said, "Thank you," even though that's not my bag. But it was a 4-month investigation. I had to subpoena the banks, the escrow companies, and the guy that did it was, you know what a 1031 exchange is, where for land. Where what happens is there's a tax loophole, and you can trade one piece of property, because I used to deal in real estate, one piece of property for a like or higher property, and if it never touches your hand, you don't have to pay the increase in value, right? So there's what's called an accommodator, and these are legal people that they start their companies and they put the money. So this guy sells it, but this property isn't ready to go in escrow. So they sell it. The accommodator takes the money, puts it in an account, and holds it until this property is ready to go, right? So he has all this money in his bank account. Well, this Ponzi scheme guy got hooked up with this guy and said, "I can give you blah, 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 15, 20% of your money." And this was an international incident because the Ponzi guy got caught, and he ended up driving he was wanted. He drove his SUV off a cliff in Seattle and killed himself. That's the same guy that caused this guy's house of cards to fall. So all these people lost all their money. So I tell my boss, he give me the case, I work it up. I go to my boss and I said, "This is the way I want to do it." He goes, "Okay, clear it with the attorney, the assistant attorney." I go tell him, "Yeah, this is what I'm going to do." He goes, "Oh yeah, that's a good idea." So I go back and I start typing up the warrant. I'm going to write a warrant for his house and for his records first. Start because he's going to get wind of me and he's going to.
You want to get everything first,
right? So I get my boss calls me on the phone. Goes, come in here. I'm in his office. He goes, "No, we want you to work from the outside in." I said, "All right, but it's not going to come out nice.
When I get to the end, there's going to be nothing left."
So I interview all the victims. I do the subpoenas for all the bank records, the escrow companies, all that stuff. And I had a 3-ring binder, a huge 3-ring binder. And so finally it's time to go after the guys. So I subpoena Bank of Hawaii. And I call them up. I said, "Hey, I'm a special agent so-and-so. I need to come and have a subpoena for you." "Okay, come on Tuesday and talk to so-and-so." So I get a ticket and fly over to Kauai. Over to Kauai. I got to see all the islands. I mean, I loved it for 3 years. It was a bitchin' job. So I rent a car, drive to the bank. I'm in my Aloha shirt. I take up my so-and-so here. I need to serve the subpoena. Oh, she called in sick today.
Of course she did.
Go get the records today, right? Because this guy was a pillar of the community and everybody was going to protect him. So I said, I'll talk to the manager. The manager goes, no, she's the only one that can do it. I go, all right. So I look around the bank and I see this chair over next, and I drag this big, huge, comfy chair over to the center of the bank, and I just sit in this chair in the center of the bank, and everybody's going, "What's going on? What's he doing?" And I'm there for about an hour just looking around. People come into the bank because I'm right by the front doors, and finally the manager comes over and goes, "All right, I'll give you your records." So then because I was a new guy, because I was bored. I wouldn't have normally done it. I volunteered for the evidence. Give me the evidence. So just so I had something to do. So their evidence, they didn't have any interim evidence lockers. Everybody kept stuff in their desk drawers. So
chain of custody. So, sort of.
So I look at all this and I write this big memo, 2-page memo saying, "This is what's wrong. This is what's wrong. This is how I can fix it. And if we don't do it, pretty soon, all the cases that we do are going to go, and all the ones we have done, if somebody finds out about it." And so I handed it to my boss, and he handed it to the chief, because I wanted to, requisition lockers and a new computer system. I'm going to do the whole thing the right way. And I get called into the chief's office and close the door, and he doesn't yell because it's the Hawaii spirit, but he is angry. And he goes, "Why did you put this on paper?" Because it's mine. So if I don't, I documented it because I work internal affairs. He's not going to cut the tree branch off of me at the end of it. So, and so I left a couple of days later. I told my boss, I said, "Hey, there's still a problem because everybody's got stuff in their drawers and they've heard about this. And I think we need to give 2 weeks amnesty for people to turn their stuff in," right? He goes, "No, that's not." So he takes me to the chief's office. I explain my case and he goes, all right. He puts out a memo, and this special agent comes in from the airport. He worked the airport this whole time as a special agent, and he's wheeling 2 of these check bags, right? And he doesn't say anything because I never met him before. I don't talk to him. He just walks in my office, sits down, unzips it, and he starts taking guns. Bam, out of the bag. Bam. Guns he seized at the airport, right? I am not kidding you. I had a pile of guns like this on my desk. And I go, "Okay, where's your paperwork?" He goes, I didn't do any paperwork." I go, "What do you mean?" "No, I just took the guns and..." So now, I go, "Man, I can't take them. I'm not going to take them unless you give me paper. I can't." So he loads it back up and he leaves. He looks kind of confused. So I'm thinking about it. I said, "Oh man, now I'm in a crack because if I have knowledge of it, right?" So I go to my boss and I said, "Look, this is what happened." They fired the guy.
Were you the first, or was it uncommon for a mainlander to be over there work for the AGs?
Well, what happened was they're cheap, and the money was so low that the people, they couldn't get quality people to take that amount of money, so they were stuck. So when I applied, they thought, "Oh yeah, this is." But I bought airtime back when you could buy airtime. So I went out with 97% of my pay. I was getting full pay from the mainland. So I didn't care what they were paying me here.
Right.
So it didn't really matter. But that's why they couldn't get people to do it. And, some of the people, 2 of the supervisors had not even gone through a full-time academy. So it was a unique situation.
So when you were coming to the end of that and you started to see the light at the end of that tunnel, like you're done with law enforcement, you said you've already written a bunch of manuscripts. Did you have a book lined up that was actually going to be coming out at this point?
No, I didn't sell one until I got back to the mainland about 2 years after I got back. Because it was, we got back out of 2011. What happened was the humidity just kind of grinds me down. But I was running a long distance. And they'd fly me to all the islands, do my investigations. And I got some of the most beautiful long distance runs. Kona Harbor at sunset, I did that one about 5 times. I do 6-mile runs. At Kauai was a great run too. So that was a good part of it. But the other part was the knuckleheads, that you deal with. We didn't work the same way. We didn't see eye to eye. And I got along with them. It's just that there was no camaraderie. One team was fudging the books and they were going to play golf all the time. And they started calling me, my name was Mr. Law Enforcement because, that's not the way we're doing this. We're going to do it the right way, right? So one time, the whole crew is grabbing their bags and they're going out the door. And I go, "What's going on?" And they go, "Oh, you stay here and answer the phones." And it turned out it was a Mr. Law Enforcement thing because it was a state investigation into the schools, and they were going to take the broom and lift the carpet up and they knew that I wasn't going to put up with that. So you just stay right here. And Coco Head, it's a huge crater on Oahu. That's where we did our shooting every 3 months. So it was a lot of fun, but the humidity got to me. And then the tax guy, one day I said, "Hey, what am I actually making because of the money from both places?" He goes, "Oh, you're making $6 an hour." So, with that, and why am I staying? And then, and my wife decided that that's what started the whole thing. She says, "I don't want to do this job anymore." She worked for a defense contractor 2 blocks from where I worked, and I could meet her for lunch. And it was a pretty sweet setup. So she said she didn't want to do that anymore. And so I jumped on it. She goes, "Oh, I didn't know you wanted to leave too." So we just up and left. Her parents were upset about it. So we sold our condo, and it was like a 800 square foot condo with an eye on the 14th floor overlooking the water. And we bought a house in Temecula. And she was going to go back to work for her old company. And she goes, my parameters are I don't want to drive. So 5 miles within where the company is, and it ended up being in Duluth. So we saw this bank repo for sale, and the realtor showed it to us. And it was in 2011. And we bought it for $430. And it's a view lot that overlooks the whole valley of Duluth. It's really a nice place, but now we're getting squeezed out by the mortgage insurance. And it's just horrible. I mean, we're really getting squeezed. We're stuck. We can't sell it, and the insurance keeps going up.
Yeah.
Nobody will buy it now because of the insurance.
When you stepped away and considered it the end of your career, were you ready to step away? What was that transition like to now being completely away from law enforcement?
Well, and the reason I brought that up about the internal affairs, and because Fontana was what they considered the hottest part of San Bernardino County. It was always shootings and murders and that kind of thing. So I went from sergeant there, supervising other people having fun, to internal affairs. So I kind of was on a downhill slope. And I got to Hawaii, and it was just a little flash of fun, and then a grind. So I thought, I'm not out chasing crooks anymore. It's not law enforcement really. So it wasn't really a difficult decision to make. But as soon as I left, we bought that house had 5 acres of avocados, and I bought another 11 acres of avocados. And I was a gentleman rancher. I was making my own fertilizer, doing a lot of work myself. It was keeping me busy, and I'd still ride at night. But I still had a problem for 2 years. I could not decelerate. I could not. I still dream about chasing crooks. My wife says that I know you're dreaming because my legs are running. That kind of thing. So, yeah. And I think what really saved me was when I sold that book, because that was 10 years ago. And this year, this is my 32nd event this year. I did 21 book signings at Barnes and Nobles, and I did the Men of Mystery, and then BoucherCon, and all those things. So I am busier now than I was when I was working.
So let's get into your writing career. I've heard you in interviews talk about that you actually wrote either your first or your early books while sitting there doing surveillance on a meth house.
Yeah. Well, I said before how I was an avid reader. And so they gave me a badge and a gun, and I got to chase crooks, and I was working plain clothes, narcotics, and I was on a meth lab surveillance in Lucerne Valley, which there's nothing out there. And a lot of people think that surveillances are like what they show on TV, and they're not like that. You have one guy with the eye, and everybody else is laid off somewhere in a parking lot. And like some guys had TVs, and some guys played basketball, and somebody yells, "Okay, we're rolling," and we jump in the cars and we follow somebody. So I kept novels in the back seat of my car, and I would read books. So they're paying me to play cops and robbers, and I get to read novels, right? So I'm down to my last book in the back seat of my car, and it's they call it a sophomore effort of this guy who was an international bestseller. I read that book. I thought it was great, so I thought, this is going to be a good book. But what happens is an author will work on a book for 10 years and keep rewriting it, but he's not improving his craft. You have to have your craft down tight. So this next book came out, and it was a dog. But I was a captive audience, so I read the whole book all the way through, and I thought, I could do better than this. So I wrote my first 4 novels on the front seat of my car. Each one was 4 legal pads long. And I quickly realized that a good author makes it look easy, because it is not anywhere near easy as you think it might be. And then I got an agent, and I jumped a writing class, learned how to write, and it was just a progression of things. That was from 1989. So 89, I wrote those first books, and I continued. I wrote all kinds of books. And like I said, I was on my 38th book when the publisher picked up number 36. I'm on number 65 or 66 right now.
Now, into 30 plus books, are the ideas just always there, and you just start putting it to paper, or did new stories come out of did book number 9 come from what you were writing in book number 2 or something like that?
Well, it's an artistic thing, I think, and everybody's different, and everybody has a different muse. My earlier books, I would start with an inciting incident, and then I would write the book on both sides of that. So sometimes I'd write it as a first chapter, and the worst was I ended up writing 11 chapters before that inciting incident to motivate what happened up to that. I became much better at writing, and so now I start off with 3 plot lines. I don't know what's going to happen. I never know what's going to happen in the book. I start off with 3 plot lines, and I have 1 main trunk plot line and 2 secondary plot lines that run side by side, and I scene sequence. So I'll do 3 scenes on 1 plot line, transition over, 3 scenes, and I'm going back and forth as I go down. And there's some people call it the 3-act play. A lot of people call that. I don't. I call it, there's 4 C's of a plot, and it's conflict, complication, crisis, conclusion. And what I was doing wrong was my conflict was too long. And once I shortened my conflict and shifted to a thriller structure, that's when I started selling books.
Law enforcement doesn't lend itself to creative writing. As a matter of fact, everybody kind of gets beat in from the day they start, keep it simple, stupid, and write the least amount. How hard was it to kind of transition after 20 plus years of law enforcement? Or did you struggle the opposite way? Did your reports start getting so long that people were like, hey, what are you writing, a novel?
No, I liked writing right from the beginning. So when I was in LA, before I even started, because I didn't start writing until 89, I left LA in 86. I had a reputation for report writing. So like one time there was an officer involved shooting. Sweaty Marty shot this guy in the projects, and he gets me on Charlie and goes, "Come over here. Can you come over here?" And so I go drive over there. Are you okay? Everything. And people are throwing bricks and bottles at us from the roofs. And I go, what are you in before? He goes, "Can you write this for me?" Right. So then I knew right then that, and so then my reports were, I really got them kicked back once I figured out what they wanted. And, in San Bernardino, I had the same thing. The captain of narcotics called me in one day. He goes, "Hey, the newspaper called me. We were a HIDA for the high density drug area for meth labs. We were like the number 1 in the country for meth labs. So they wanted somebody to explain it. So he goes, write this for me." And I wrote it and gave it to the captain. He gave it to the newspaper, and they printed it verbatim in a newspaper, right? So that kind of thing. And my wife, when people ask that same question, how do you learn how to write? And she goes, he's been writing short stories his entire career because of the crime reports, right? So another time, I wrote this memo on this use of force because I shot this dog. It was a horrible situation, but I was going to get eaten real bad by this huge dog, and so I wrote this this memo laying the whole thing out, and my sergeant used to say, write it and flower it up a little. That's what he used to say. You write this shooting and kind of flower it up. So I had that reputation for writing anyway, because I liked to write.
When you're sitting down to write, for instance, if you're writing the current book, do you only write on that one? Or if you get a new idea, will you start multiple projects?
Yeah, I'm writing 3 books at once right now. I'm working on 3. But what happens is it draws my focus because I'm still I follow the 17 precepts that I'm writing this book, and I'm going forward, and then something that's like a shiny bauble pulls my attention away. So I have art sketchbooks. I use art sketchbooks because that's just the way I do it. I'll take notes on the next novel, and I start drawing diagrams. Even though I don't know what's going to happen, I'm trying to get the background and motivation for the characters. That's what you need most before you start. I'm working on one now called Pablo and Peaches. And this book is a fun book to write, and that's what I like. I like the fun part of it. And this was the genesis of this one was when I used to, play with crooks, like I've told you about the crook car. So I would put them in a cop car, and I would wrap the radio cord around their arm, and I'd say, "This is the cop car polygram, a lie detector test, right?" I said, "Look at the light on the console, and when that red light comes on, it means you're lying." I'd hold the key, the mic around. I said, "You steal the car?" No, I push the button. Okay, I stole the car, that kind of thing. So I wanted to put that story, make it into a full book about how a detective could read people very well. So Pablo is this detective in Northern California, and he's sitting at this cafe, and his car comes around a roundabout, and this Chihuahua comes flying out the window. And somebody just tosses the tire to the Chihuahua, throws it out the window, right? Falls, skids, breaks his leg. So Pablo picks the dog up. Oh my God, the dog! And he looks at the license on the tag, right? And he says, Peaches, and says the name, and the dog goes, rah, 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 starts biting him because the owner used to go, Peaches, 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 and beat the dog. So it was a Pavlovic. So now he's got this dog that he knows how it reacts. So now he sets the dog in front of a crook. Now this dog can tell if you can lie. And I'm having so much fun with that book because that dog is just a little shit ass. I'm just about done. I'm in the crisis. I'm halfway through the crisis on that one, and it'll be done in 2 weeks.
Now, I first learned of you through your Bruno Johnson series, and I didn't realize when I got Sinister that was actually not the first in the series. So then I had to start going backwards. When you develop a character that's going to span multiple books, is it something you planned, or did it just kind of happen?
Well, the publishing industry is fluid and keeps moving about. But one thing that's consistent is that when you sell a book, you're trying to, the publisher doesn't necessarily buy it for artistic value. They buy it for the bottom line, what's going to sell. So sometimes it's the person that wrote the book, and the book's a dog, but it's the person selling it kind of thing. It's a market issue.
Right.
So they want you to establish a readership. So that the first book was The Disposables, and I knew that because I've been immersed in the writing world since '89. I sold that book in 2014, so I knew the writing world inside and out. I had 4 agents before I sold the first book, so I knew that they would want a sequel. So I was writing another book. I stopped as soon as they picked it up. I stopped and I started writing a sequel. So I did not plan to make it a series, but I knew that they were going to want a sequel. So I started writing a sequel. The second book I wrote was about the most dangerous person I ever dealt with. His name was James Lawless. He had tattoos from his chin all the way down. His whole body was tattooed. He had a ram on his pelvic, the horns on each hip. His penis was tattooed as a snout he was a bad dude. So I wanted to put him in the book, but I put him in book 2, and I didn't like the guy at all in the real world, so I killed him off in book 3. So when you're writing a book, you can't have a character that's like, dun, 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 has no flaws, because he turns into a caricature, right? So same thing with a crook. If he's so heinous, he turns into a caricature too. So the reverse is that you have to give your crook a little bit of humanity in order for him to be real, right? So I gave him a little bit of humanity, and Bruno's wife ends up taming him a little bit in book 2, but I didn't like him, so I killed him off in book 3, sent it in. They go, no, we like Carl Drago. So they wanted me to rewrite the book and put Carl back in the book, but it wouldn't work, and they didn't like the female FBI agent. So I rewrote the whole book. I mean, they turned it down in December, and I resubmitted it in February, and I rewrote, and they said, oh, this is such a great rewrite. And I felt like saying, you kept the title. That's all. The whole book is different. But that's what I was learned by doing, and my books get so much better as you go along because I changed my method, my style of writing. It to Sinister worked out perfect. So I have those 3 plot lines that are running parallel, and the best outcome is to have them all end up at the same time at the end of the book. That book got a star review in Publishers Weekly, which is hard to get into Publishers Weekly, let alone get a star review. And it was chosen as best mystery by the mystery editor on Amazon.
When you talk about how multiple books potentially could culminate at a single ending, is that something that as when you're developing it, are you working those multiple angles at one time? You're like, okay, here's the end where I need to get to, and then I'm going to have each one of these books kind of, or does it just happen fluidly?
Well, and this is where I've taught this class because the people hear about it and they keep emailing me and asking me to come and teach this class on writing a novel. When I'm talking about the 4 C's, the conflict, the complication, crisis, conclusion, right? That's the length. That's what your playground. So I start in the conflict. And when I write that conflict, I am laying down all kinds of stuff that I'm going to pull forward in the story, right? So I'm just really laying everything in there. And then I go to the next, I drop into the complication, and I'm working off what I already did. So the motivation is what's dictating what's going to happen in a complication, right? And the complication is like a funnel to the crisis, and the crisis is like the end of the big blow up at the end of the book. I was going to say something else about the conflict. Yeah. Also, Bruno Johnson has a makeshift. Bruno Johnson's an ex-cop, ex-con who rescues children from toxic homes. He couldn't do it as a cop because there's too many rules and regulations. So now he goes outside law to rescue children. He has a makeshift orphanage down in Costa Rica. So if I don't like I didn't like to dwell down in Costa Rica because I visited there, but I don't know it as well as I know the streets, right. the atmosphere, everything up here, and the tone is so important in a book. So. Get Bruno on a plane to come up here to caper, to do a caper, I have to motivate him, right? So that's the conflict. I set the conflict in Costa Rica. He gets on, as soon as he steps on that plane, my complication starts. See, so I don't know what's going to happen in that complication. I just know, and I don't know what's going to happen in the conflict. I just think, here's an idea, and I flesh out my conflict, and if I do that right, there's 6 things the scene needs to do to work, and I have 3 plot lines, and I'm putting those 6 things in each plot line. That forces me, it puts pressure on the text that runs my story for me. That's what's so fun about it, because I don't know what's going to happen. I'm just following what's going along. And that's what happened in the Sinister. Sinister came out really, I thought it came out, I don't know if you read the book or not.
I'm about a third of the way through it.
Yeah.
So don't ruin it for me. When you're sitting down to write, do you have to go back and kind of re-review what you were writing to put you back into the same frame of mind? Or can you, it's a 2-part question, or will how you're feeling personally kind of dictate the tone of what you're writing?
Yeah, I think you must have listened to one of my, yes, that's very true. My method is, before I sit down, because I don't want my emotions, my personal emotions, to leak into the tone of the book. There's tone, cadence, voice that can be affected by, if I'm slightly elated, I'm slightly depressed. I don't want that to leak into the book. So I go back 20 pages every day, and I start edit till I get to the new stuff. Then I write 4 pages. So I am circling back 4 times before I move forward, and that's how I write the entire book. But I write in Microsoft Word, and so every time I have the manuscript, and then down below I'll think of something like one of these things, one of these anchors I call them, a foreshadow. I drop down and I put that in a note, and then when I use it, I delete it so I know where I am. Then I have down below that I have the names I'm using, and I have the locations I'm using. So because I can keep track of what's going on. Below that, I have what I call a novel diagram. So I'll have chapter 1, Bruno, intro Bruno, such and such, and I do a 1-sentence brief on what that scene is. So I could look, right now I'm on chapter 60. I could look at my novel diagram and I can say, I can see the rise and fall of my story and make sure it's just right where it is. I can see where the conflict ends, the complication starts. I can see my novel at a glance. I told my publisher that, I don't know, about 8 books back, that this is what I was doing. And so I'd email the manuscript, and she'd email back, send your novel diagram too, because they were using it themselves when they were editing the book.
And is the diagram where you basically start every book?
No, I don't start the diagram until after I've written like 3 or 4 chapters.
Oh.
And then I'll start, because then it starts getting away from me, right? So I know my conflict. The shorter your conflict, the better the book's going to be, because the conflict is your contract with the reader. This is saying, this is what I'm going to show you, right? So the shorter it is, down and dirty, the better chance you have of selling that book. And I found that out the hard way.
You mentioned that you kind of go back, review 20 pages, and then write another 4. Do you have a maximum that you'll write when you sit down in a day, or at a writing period?
2,000 words. I don't go over 2,000 words, because then the writing starts to suffer. And I don't want to do a whole lot of rewrite when I come back to it the next day. What I'll do is, sometimes I'll get into scene and I want to keep going, I'll drop down and I'll do a couple of lines saying this is what needs to happen next. Just a couple of quick things, so I'm continually moving forward.
And when you're done for the day, do you have to intentionally turn off your brain and stop thinking about the?
Oh no, it goes. Well, I will tell you, we go to drinking, we go to a restaurant, and I have napkins we'll be sitting there talking, and all of a sudden, just a minute, and I'll take a note on a napkin, and I got napkins on my nightstand right on my table I'm writing right now. That I haven't logged them in. But so I'll take that art sketchbook, and I'll take those napkins and log the notes in, and then throw them away so I don't. And I get lazy, and my napkins pile up.
For somebody who might be thinking like, oh, I want to write a book. I'm sure this is such an over-asked and probably a million answer type questions, but what would you recommend besides simply starting to write? What would be the kickoff point? You've mentioned that you've taught a class. Should somebody do formal instruction in writing?
Well, yeah, you can't just sit down and people mimic mostly when they first start out, they're mimicking. And that's not what's going to get you published, mimicking. You have to establish your own voice. And there's 3 parts of voice. And the voice is one of the most difficult things. Sometimes I read a lot of books and I follow all the periodicals of what's happening in the writing world. And I just lost my train of thought on that one.
Establishing your voice.
Yeah. So somebody will say, that was the best book I ever read. And you ask them, well, what was it about? And they stop and think, I don't know. Because the voice carried the whole book. The story is not even secondary or tertiary. It's way back because the writing voice is so beautiful. The prose is so beautiful, it pulls you through. So I call that, there's Meat and Potatoes, and that's a literary book. And there's Chocolate and Popcorn, which is the commercial fiction, which is what I write. I try to write a little bit on the edge of popcorn and chocolate, or on the edge of Meat and Potatoes, because I want to have a little bit more depth in my prose. And I like the Meat and Potato books sometimes. Sometimes they're too full of themselves and I can't read them. So if the person wants to start out writing, I say, start writing your book. Just start writing it. And then you find somebody like me, and many times now I'll say, somebody asks me to help them, and I also say, send me 50 pages. And then I will sit down, because it's best to learn off of what you've already done so you can see it yourself. So I will mark up those 50 pages and then give them the hour and a half indoctrination. This is why this is wrong, and this is why this works, and this step by step. And I give them my outline of my how to write, the 16 precepts, 17 precepts. And then I show them on their work and explain it to them. And one guy, this young kid, he's 26 years old. He's writing a fantasy. I met him at Barnes & Noble's. He was a manager. And he told me he was writing a fantasy. I said, well, this is what I do. And so he sent me the 50 pages. I met him at the coffee shop in Temecula, and I said, blah, 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 blah. And he went back and rewrote it. He put it up on Wattpad, and he had such a huge response over what he was doing that he called me back and goes, hey, I want another lesson. So, and now he just emailed me, goes, I'm in Indiana now, managing Barnes & Noble. Do you mind if I teach your method? I said, I don't care. Knock yourself out.
Do you see yourself in the future moving away from more writing and more just doing more teaching and advising?
No. Now, writing is in my blood. I got to write every day. I write every day, 7 days a week. Holidays, 5 hours a day.
You spend 5 hours a day. And I just say that because there are a lot of us who don't even dictate that. We barely dictate that much time to sleeping.
Yeah. And I just recently changed my priorities because I put on too much weight. So now I shifted. I do my exercise like 5 miles before I start riding. 5 miles every day, continuously. The process of getting you said you went through 4 agents before you actually got published. My agent didn't find the publisher. I told you my wife's friend did. Yeah, and that's one agent. I had 4 agents. 2 were horrible and 2 were good. And the one I had for 15 years, he loved my work. And I used to keep a 3-ring binder, and I think I threw it away. But my first rejection was in red ink on the cover page. Learn to write before resubmitting. That's tough. That's tough to take. So at the end of this one agent, I was getting 2-page rejections. This means the editor was taking the time to say, this is good, but this is what needs to be fixed. And then I made it to acquisitions twice with that agent. So what happens is there are a bunch of editors and a senior editor, and there's a committee, and there's only so many slots that that publisher's putting out. So if these editors will bring their projects to the table, and they have to fight for their project. And I made it to that table twice before I got knocked out.
For somebody, though, to find an agent, what's that process like?
Yeah, right now, there are so many people writing because of the convenience of software that it's just flooded, and there's so much self-published books that people should not even be putting them up because they're just horrifically written. But there are some really great self-published books, but the percentage is very small. The way I got agents, I would query them and not get any response. I started frequenting the book conferences, the writing conferences, and then I would read up ahead of time on who's going to be there and who fit my genre the best, my chocolate and popcorn kind of writing. And then I would sit in the lobby of the conference and just watch, just like I did for Crooks. There he is, or there she is. And I would stand up, hey, how you doing? I'm so-and-so, and this is a bit of it. And I got all 4 agents that way by ambushing them.
Are you old school in the sense that you want to hold a book when you're reading it? What's your opinion on the growth of books on tape or audiobooks as opposed to actually physically holding the book?
What's happening right now is there are so many minutes that are in a reader. So you have so many readers, and then you have so many minutes that those readers are reading. So those are being overwhelmed. Those minutes are being overwhelmed by the cheap books. So my books, the publisher, like this month, or December, 3 of my books are going up on what's called BookBub, and it's $1.99 for my books, right? So if a reader, an avid reader, waits for the BookBub and pays $1.99, why are they going to buy? I think my book is $11.99 for the digital online. Why are they going to pay $11.99 when they can get it for $2? And that's what was going on for like the last 5 years. Now there's a thing called bookends and booksends and a bunch of different things, and they're putting all these self-published books up there for free or for 99 cents. So now that market is shoving into those minutes of reading, eyes on books, and it's actually pushing out the lower level publishers, because now you're going to have the big publishers who have the big names and put the money into the marketing. And there used to be 3 levels of publishers. The big 6, now it's big 5. I think it's going down to big 4. Then you had the mid range. Then you had the lower houses. And now there's no mid house. There's just lower houses. And now the lower publishers are getting pushed out by what I just explained.
Not sure where you're going to go with this, but I want to crack this can. What's your take on AI and how it is impacting writers and writing?
That is still so new that it's hard to tell. We've had people. I put on a writers group every Thursday. People come to my house and we read and do read and critique. And some people have tried. I want a book with this in it. That gives that criteria for the AI, and it was decent, but there was a lack of transitions. And transitions are very important, and there's no voice. The voice he's mimicking other books that he's pulling from. The AI is. So I don't think AI can get the voice, the emotion, because people, the reason they're reading is for emotions, right? And conflict is emotion. So you need to have conflict on every page of your manuscript, and the AI can put the conflict there, but without the reaction, without the emotion of the story, which is the heart of the book, is the character's emotion as he evolves through the story.
In one of your recent books, and I apologize, I don't remember the name, but it started as your memoirs.
Yeah, that's this one here. This book is my first year on the street. I wrote it as a memoir. I couldn't get it to work because of the story arc, because I was probably too close to it because it happened to me. So I wrote the first half is memoir. I wrote my first year in the street, my innocence, my ignorance. I put that in there, and cops have read that book and they said, I know exactly what you're talking about in that book. And then I stopped the book halfway through, and I transitioned with a transition to a fictional arc. And there's still some stuff that's real in there, but it's mostly a fictional arc to make the story work.
Where I was going with it is, if somebody's sitting there thinking, oh, I had a storied career and I've got all these stories and I want to write my memoir, if that's their only desire, then write that. But if they want to become a fiction writer, should they start with a memoir or leave it alone? Your opinion?
They should just start writing, period. You have to write every day because you're not going to improve at all. And you can't just sit down. There's some cases where people say, I wrote this, I sat down and wrote it 6 months and I sold it. And there's when about 6 years ago, when I was following, I'm still following, but they stated that there were 4 million books that came out 1 year. That was 6 years ago. And now it's more and more, it's just exponentially. So,
how much is self-publishing those skewing? I don't want to say skewing, but impacting those numbers.
They're mostly all self-published books. Your biggest market is nonfiction. That's the biggest piece of the market. Fiction is smaller. So you can imagine how many nonfiction books are out there, self-help and that kind of thing. But the self-published books are part of that's out there. I went to a book signing at the Wine on a Dime here in Temecula. I don't know if you've ever been to it. It's closed now. And I know all the books that are coming out. I follow it very, very avidly. Fantasy, I read whatever's well written, I'll read it. I'm talking to these two guys that come up and they're naming all these books that they just loved. And I thought I had a brain. Because I don't know any of them. Any of them, yeah. So I wrote them all down. I go home, and every one of those were self-published books on one of those platforms that were 99 cents or free. And so those eyes are being pulled away by those self-published books. And I pulled those books up, and they are crap. But a reader can't discern craft over, what they like as a story. You have a better chance of having a good story if you know your craft, if you know the voice.
I would imagine it kind of equates to people who make music for a living. There are some true musicians and people who appreciate the skill in being able to write a good song, play an instrument, appreciate it more than somebody who I just like that song and I move on to the next one.
Well, songwriting with the lyrics is a condensed version of poetry, and poetry is a condensed version of a novel. So you really got to know what you're doing when you're writing a song and or poetry, just like writing a novel, but it's a totally different animal. It's like a screenplay. People, why don't you write a screenplay? And I said, I had to stop what I'm doing and study it because it's totally different than what I'm doing. The Sinister, I hired this woman in New York, and she was, because The Sinister got the Star Review. I wanted to push it a little harder. So I hired this one in New York, and she put these bags together for the high dollar hotels in New York and a couple of them in Hollywood. And you come and check in your room and you'd find The Sinister sitting on your nightstand that you could take, or a gift bag. So she said, she read The Sinister and she goes, wow, this is a killer book. And so she said, she doesn't ask me, but she was an investor in another company. This guy in the military intelligence gets out of the military and he starts this company, and I used to know the name of it. Books to Film. Books to Film is what it's called. And so he started inputting, because everything's digital now, he inputted 50,000 novels in this. And then he inputted, I don't know how many, just every screenplay or whatever he can get his hands on. He inputted all that stuff. And Netflix and some of the big platforms got wind of what he's doing, and they invested in it. They started getting analysts for inputting all these different criteria, right? And they would get books that would rate 76%, 60%, 50% on what their goal was. So she goes to this company, Books to Film, sends them the digital copy of that. They plug it into their platform, and it hit 97%. And they went, "Oh, what is going on with this book?" So I called my publisher, told her about it, and they told because the publisher has the rights to the book. I can't. I could have sold a couple of these books 5 times now. 5 times I had a producer wanting it, but the publisher has the right to say yay or nay on it. And they have a big time movie agent in LA, and that agent says that you only have one shot at it in LA. If it goes around and gets nixed, no matter how good it is, it's not going to be resurrected. You got one shot. And I understand that. So they don't want those 5 publishers that I had a shot at. They were too small time. They didn't have the juice to get behind it. They were just trying to piggyback off of me and start their career. So we had to. I told the publisher about it, and they got a little excited about it. But we had to ask the film agent, because they're very touchy kind of thing. Ask their permission, because the woman that gave it to Books On, she knew Denzel Washington, and she wanted to hand it to Denzel Washington. So we had to, kind of tippy-toe around that agent so they didn't kick the publisher off so it went to Denzel Washington, made it to his main guy, his producer, and they nixed it. And they said, "We nixed it because it's too much like this." And I pulled it up, and it's not even, I don't think he might not even read the book, because it wasn't even close.
It just has to be in the same ballpark, and they're going to say it's the same.
Yeah, I don't know. It was just a rejection.
So from me being a reader's perspective, and I do this often when I'm reading, I start picturing it as a movie,
right?
And who might be playing a character. And I'm sure everybody who's done that. When you're writing, do you ever allow it to creep in of if this was on screen and somebody was acting it, or does that never become part of your writing?
No, I try to write it what they call cinematically. And I have a lot of people saying, I saw this as a movie as I was reading it. I do that on purpose, because you want the story to pull you through. You don't want what I call churning, where you hit a spot and the author is just kind of full of himself and just starts blah, 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 blah. Mine's not like that. I am very concise, and I move the story along.
Has the further you've gotten into this and more and more of your books actually being published, has it taken a little bit of the enjoyment of reading, in the sense that you don't want to start mimicking another author?
No, but it has ruined my reading, because I start reading a book and I said, "Oh, this is not good." Or I can see, "Oh, this guy did it right here." Just like in the movies, I can see the motivation. As soon as the motivation pops up, I'll tell my wife, "Oh, that guy did it right there." Because when you're reading a book, if you read it and you say, "Why is the author telling me this right now?" And if you ask yourself, you keep writing, as you go through the book, you'll start figuring the stuff out, and it's too easy. But if you just read it and just go along with it, let it flow, and not think about it, then it's you're not going to see it. You're not going to see the matrix of it.
And we've already talked about this, the growth of the self-publishing. You're 30 plus manuscripts in and not getting published and not making that next step. Hindsight being 2020, if it was 2023 and you were at that point again, would you consider self-publishing?
I think now, the way what I was talking about with those platforms, I think self-publishing is more. I would go more to self-publishing than I would go traditionally, because you don't make any money traditionally anymore, because the eyes are not on your books. They're going other, and the only way to make any money is to go self-publish. But I always wanted to be traditionally published. So I have 2 different publishers now, and I like them both. But I'm seriously thinking about going self-published on Pablo and Peaches, because it's a trilogy. I'm laying down 3 books in that first book. I'm laying down anchors and transitions for the next 3 books.
And I would imagine by going the self-publishing route, you maintain more total control of the finished product.
You maintain control of everything. This book, the publisher, the 3 books, this is the other book that just came out. These covers, this is a different publisher. So I wanted branding of my stories. So this is the Bruno Johnson story, and I wanted something that pulls the other series together. So somebody look, "Oh, that's a Dave Putnam book." So you see the way the font is?
Right.
So I hired this guy from them to maintain my covers. And I had to pay for it out of my own pocket because the other publisher says, no, we got our own guy. He said, well, and my editor said, well, we're not going to do that. And so I said, okay, I'm out. I'm not, you're not going to publish my books. And so the owner of the publishing company calls me and goes, oh, how can we fix this? What can we do? And I said, I want my own covers.
So as much as writing is your specific style, when you start thinking about the branding of you as an author, you need to be mindful because you don't want to be bouncing all over the place with different stylizing on the cover because then people aren't associating.
Right.
And something like that I would never even thought about.
Yeah, and people for years when I first started in '89, they said, "Don't write to the public, but you have to because of the political hot points, the hot buttons. Because I'm an ex-cop, I'm getting trolled on my books. My readership dropped off, and the books got better, but dropped off because people were giving me reviews, 1-star review, and they'll say, how dare you? How dare you think you could do that? I took your book into a bar and I read it out loud and we all laughed, that kind of stuff. Just horrible stuff. And my wife says, quit reading the reviews. Star Review and Publishers Weekly, and they're saying, these are people are saying, no, you can't. You drew a gun on a guy in this position, and you shouldn't be drawing guns on people. They have no idea. They're just talking, so that's why I kind of shifted. I have another book coming out in January. It's called The Blind Devotion of Imogene. And it's a story of a 73-year-old woman who just gets out of prison after 10 years for killing her husband. And I write stuff that I want to write. It's fun to write. So she gets to prison and she doesn't think she was guilty of killing her husband, but she got all this built up angst. So her cellmate says, you're going to burn out if you don't vent this some way. So she starts sending threatening letters to the president of the United States, right? And I got this idea from working a SWAT. They pulled us into executive protection for a president that was going to Palm Springs. So they had a training class with Secret Service, and they were telling us how they work it. So what happens is when the president comes to an area, they'll send an agent out to the house it's different levels of threats. And they can't arrest them or detain them because it's against their civil rights. So they're knocking on the door, hey, let's go to lunch. So Secret Service is taking these wackadoos out to lunch, right? So I wanted to play on that because that seems like that is like a mind full of all kinds of fun stuff to write about. So Secret Service comes to prison and says, hey, what are you doing? Starts talking to him. And she gets more information from the Secret Service because he thinks that she's a 73-year-old lady. She's not going to do anything, right? So she writes a book in the prison, and it's called Peekaboo POTUS, and it's about assassination of a sitting president, and she knows too much stuff on how to do it, right? so she gets out on parole, and the parole officer says you got to be gainfully employed. So she can't get a job anywhere but at a Denko, which is a grocery store with dented foods, and she's sitting on a stool, wondering what she's going to do, and she had just sold the book to Del Rey, and so she's thinking about the book, and in walks this mob guy and says, you're going to pay me $200 a week. I'm going to burn your store down. It's not her store. She doesn't care. But that's how the book starts. It starts from that. That's my opening. And I got a 3-book contract from this publisher. I did the second book, and I got the 3rd book left to write. It was a fun book to write. It's a fun book.
In talking to you, it sounds like the idea building and then growing that seems like where you get a lot of enjoyment.
Right. Oh yeah. It's fun. Yeah. Yeah. It's like doing a puzzle constantly. You're constantly thinking about a puzzle.
Has one book ever morphed and become like, we've talked about how you keep your pad going with other ideas. Have you ever been working one book and it actually just completely becomes 2 books in one just because the ideas that I'm having just work too well between the 2 of them?
I know I watch my word count. So, books are at the head of sweet spot. If you're a brand new author, you can't go above 75,000 words. Since I'm an established writer, I hit 85 or 90,000 words. So I know my word count and my conflict. I know my word count, my complication. I cannot let that story get away from me. Otherwise, it's just, one guy was writing a fantasy in our group, and he had like 4 books, and it was 1,000 pages long. And he's calling it one book, and I said, you can't do that. You got to the rise and fall. And there's so many things that's wrong with that. Each one was pretty good. I mean, I would have read the whole thing but he had to break it up. So what I do is I start liking the story so much, well, not the story, I start liking the character so much that I want to spend more time with him. So I start laying conflicts in that I'm going to pull to the next book. Like in this book, they said, hey, you left us hanging on such and such and such and such. I addressed it here. In this book, I did it on purpose, right? And then I got a couple things hanging here, and the third one is going to address the whole thing. So I do it on purpose. It could be one long book. If I wrote transitions for them, it would all blend into one long story, but I don't want to break it up.
Got it. You've mentioned the class that you taught on your 17, I'm sorry, you call them?
17 precepts.
Precepts.
I call it writing by the numbers.
Is that a class that somebody can still take, or can they find that?
I will put it on anytime a group of people want me to. What happened was a writers group. A writers group heard about it. I went and gave it, and then they emailed their other writers groups, and I started getting a bunch of different requests. And then COVID hit, and they all dropped off. And that's fine with me. I'm giving a talk. I do a lot of talks. I have 2 talks: the writing talk, and I have a talk called Anatomy of Violence, What It Takes to Shoot Somebody. And I go through the the use of force continuum, and I explain the different levels of force. And then I tell stories of my career, how my life evolved from these particular stories, and I would break down each event with the use of force continuum. And I tell them there's 3 things you need to shoot somebody. You have the legal right, the moral right, and the emotional ability to pull the trigger. And what we're seeing now is we have the legal right, and we don't have the moral right. We have the legal right to shoot it, and the public doesn't understand that we're missing two of those components. The legal right is not enough to carry it. And I explain that in the events that I was in up to that shooting I was telling you about with a kidnapped kid and a 211. And these other ones, I could have shot people. And each every one of them that I talk about, but I don't, because I didn't have all 3 components. And the other, when I finally did have to pull the trigger on that guy, I didn't have the emotional ability. That emotional ability almost got me killed, because I chased the guy on foot, and he's got a chrome 38, and we're running across the front yards. He's yelling, I'm going to kill you, I'm going to kill you. And I still could not shoot the guy. So that's why I talk about the 3 components plus the use of force continuum. And that used to be a very popular. I gave that at the conference in Thriller Fest, the largest book conference in the world. And I got notes from the people. He said that the people are saying it was the best class that they took at the conference.
But is the audience for that class still largely writers? Because it sounds like something that would be good for not just writers. I mean, even just law enforcement.
Right. Well, I was doing it too. I did it to. I gave that talk to this big group of people at Riverside University, UCR. And there's a name for this people. I forgot his big group that they have these different, I can't think of the name. It's too, but then they liked it. But one guy stood up and he was anti-police, and he just gave me what for, even though I'm explaining why I didn't shoot the guy. You know what I mean? And there's always going to be somebody in it.
Right.
And then all the hate for the cops came out, and nobody, even if they wanted to hear it, they didn't want to admit that they wanted to hear that. The explanation, because I go into how the reaction time of a cop, from the brain to the trigger, it's a second and a quarter. And if a guy's standing 15 feet away with a knife, by the time you tell your finger to pull a trigger, 1001, and he could be on you stabbing you. So you can't let him come past that 15-foot mark. I go into all that stuff, explain it to him, and it was a well-received talk.
As far as somebody who wants to write, what's your opinion on, and I'll use a very broad term, staying in your lane? So if you've been a cop for 30 years, would you say, hey, that's your wheelhouse. You understand law enforcement, so make your writing in that, or go off into something completely different?
No, if you want to write about something that you like and it's law enforcement, have at it. But if you like fantasy, I got that friend of mine I was talking about, the undersheriff. He writes fantasy, and there's nothing in law enforcement, and he's good books on fantasy. So you just write what you want to write what interests you, because otherwise it's going to tell. You're going to be able to tell in the writing if you don't like what you're doing. It's going to show, because writing is just like very temperamental. You can see everything, as far as I'm concerned.
But you're also admitting that you look at when you're reading something, you're reading it in a little critical eye.
Yeah.
So you know what to look for. I would imagine it's the same kind of thing of somebody who's an accomplished chef, and then you make a meal for them. The average person might go, "Oh, this is good," but then they'll know the nuance pieces that are missing.
So for example, number one mystery writer in the world, I was reading one of his books, and he's so big that when he submits a book, I'm sure the editor goes, "Ooh, I can see this, but I'm not going to bring it up to him," right? And what happens is there's a thing called what I call dialogue ticks. So the author started putting W-E-L-L, comma, da-da-da-da, right? And it's okay if one character has it, right? But it was bleeding into
every character.
And I counted 200 wells before page 75. And the average reader probably won't even see it.
Right.
But it's me, it's like, oh, his fingernails on a chalkboard. Like, what are you doing? Because it's such an easy fix not to do that. There's 5 ways to tag dialogue. And that's the easiest way to overpower your prose. So somebody will tag it with an adjective or a verb, and you don't want that. There's a carriage return tag, and there's a context tag. That's what you want to try to keep. Limit two tags at once. But people hand me stuff, and it's tagged 5 times. There's 5 tags on that thing. And all of a sudden, your story comes to a complete halt because it's too dense.
It's the same thing learning to speak in front of a group.
Your ums and your ahs, and
you don't realize it until you record yourself. And like you said, it could be the ums and the ahs. It could be a certain key word that you always revert to. But until you hear it, you don't realize it.
Yeah.
As far as just to kind of wrap this up, any last pieces of advice for a fledgling writer and getting going?
Well, a writer's group will help a lot. Because if you just start writing with no direction, that's fine, but you're going to have to have direction sometime to learn. It took me, like I said, 36 manuscripts, but I'm a knuckle-dragging Neanderthal kind of thing. With dyslexia, there's no way I should have ever written a book.
Or at least the one that was legible or readable.
Exactly.
Well, I appreciate your time, and I wish you the continued success on all your books.
Thank you.
I appreciate you watching. But before you go, if you like the video, please hit that subscribe button. Also, any comments are appreciated. Thank you.